They gathered like it was sport, children on barrels, old men with pipes, mothers whispering behind sun-dried scarves. In the center of the square, where the well used to be, stood the cage. Iron bars warped from heat, the kind used for cattle, not men. Inside sat a figure too still to be sleeping, too bruised to be proud. The outlaw, they called him. Some said he slit a preacher's throat. Others claimed he burned down a sheriff's house with a child inside. No trial, no sentence. Just the cage. He didn't speak. Not when they spat, not when they laughed, not even when the drunkards dared to poke sticks between the bars. He flinched once, and only once, when a whip cracked too close. But mostly he just stared. At nothing. At everything. With the kind of stillness that made people nervous. That's when they started calling him cursed. Not dangerous. Just wrong. From her balcony above the tailor's shop, Miriam watched them mock him day after day. She wasn't supposed to. Her father had warned her to keep her eyes forward, her name clean. But something about the way he sat, unmoving, unbroken, made her breath catch like prayer. Not pity, not curiosity, something deeper, like recognition. He didn't belong to the cage, not really. And maybe, just maybe, neither did she. It was near dusk when she first approached. The crowd had thinned, boredom settling in like dust, and the town's attention had moved on to supper and stories. But Miriam walked with a different purpose. Her steps were slow, deliberate, like she feared breaking something fragile inside herself. She didn't speak as she stopped in front of the cage, just crouched low enough for her skirt to gather dirt and reached into her cloak. When her hand reemerged, it held a simple tin flask. She didn't slide it across the bars with drama. She just placed it gently within reach and sat back on her heels, watching, waiting. The outlaw didn't move. His eyes flicked toward it, then back to the dirt. She stayed anyway. Minutes passed like molasses. Her breath grew shallow, unsure. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe her father was right to keep her walled away. But just when she considered rising, he moved. One hand, slow, worn, deliberate, extended from beneath him. Not a lunge, not a grasp. He took the flask the way someone handles a memory, not a gift. He drank, quietly, then placed it back. Same spot. No glance, no thanks. But in that motion was something else. Permission. Miriam didn't smile. She didn't need to. She only nodded once and rose without a word. And the next night she returned. This time with a cloth bundle. Bread, small, soft, still warm. Again, no words. Again, no refusal. The townsfolk began to whisper, but she kept returning. 3 nights, then 5, then more. What began as a single gesture turned into something neither of them named. A ritual, a rhythm. 2 people sharing silence in a world too loud with judgment. Her father's voice cracked the quiet of their supper, like a storm against glass. He had heard the whispers about the girl who brought bread to a beast, who knelt like a beggar before a man with no name. His fists clenched around the edge of the table, the veins in his throat taut with shame and fear. "You carry a dowry worth more than any woman in this town," he hissed, "and you squander it on silence?" Miriam didn't answer. Not because she agreed, but because no answer would have reached him. That night, she didn't go to the square. She went to her room instead, lit a single lamp, and opened the wooden box beneath her bed. Inside lay her engagement pendant, a locket of gold with an heirloom clasp, meant for a man she didn't love, chosen by a council she hadn't voted for. She stared at it for a long time. Then she fastened it around her neck, not with ceremony, but conviction. The next morning, she walked to the cage at high noon, when the town was busiest. She didn't wait for whispers. They came like gnats. She stepped through them, unbothered. She reached the cage, took off the pendant, and hung it gently on the bars. A hush rippled outward. For a breath, even the sheriff stopped chewing. No explanation, no speech, just a gesture. By dusk, the mayor was red-faced. The women were scandalized. But Miriam walked straight to the sheriff's post, knocked twice, and asked her question like it was the only one that mattered. "What's the price to open the cage?" And the sheriff laughed, expecting a bluff, but her voice didn't waver. "Name it," she said. "I'm not here to play." The sheriff spat tobacco into the dirt before naming a number, loud enough for the men nearby to hear, high enough to sting. It wasn't just currency he wanted, it was humiliation. A lesson. He leaned back in his chair, waiting for the girl to falter. But Miriam didn't blink. She reached beneath her cloak and pulled a leather pouch from her satchel, one tied with a thread of her mother's veil. It was everything. Her dowry, her future, the sum of her expected life. She placed it on the table between them, like she was handing over the cost of a meal, not the weight of expectation. The sheriff's smirk twitched. He didn't speak right away, maybe thinking she'd come to regret it, that someone would stop her. But the silence held. No one came. No one dared. A few townsfolk shuffled awkwardly. One man muttered a prayer under his breath. Another scoffed that she was bewitched. Miriam didn't look at them. Her eyes stayed fixed on the sheriff, not daring him, just steady, unmoving, like the outlaw in the cage. With a shrug, the sheriff stood and retrieved a ring of iron keys from a hook. "You'll regret this," he muttered, more to himself than to her. She said nothing. The cage creaked open. The outlaw didn't rise at first. His head remained bowed, unmoving, but slowly, steadily he stood, taller than they remembered, not broken, not grateful, just present. He stepped out, his gaze scanning no one in particular, and came to stand beside Miriam. No words exchanged, just the sound of freedom, quiet, uncertain, but irreversible. They left without goodbye. No banners waved, no farewells shouted. The road waited, dry and stubborn, as if it too didn't know what to make of them. Miriam sat on the wagon bench, reins in hand, while he walked alongside, a quiet sentinel with nothing to prove. He didn't ask where they were going. She didn't ask why he followed. Some things didn't need names to be real. The first night, they camped near a willow that bent like it carried secrets. She gathered stones to circle a fire. He brought back wood without being told. He didn't ask where to put it, just placed it with care. Later, when her fingers fumbled over a knot in her cloak, she found it retied, tight, warm, done while she wasn't looking. By the second day, something resembling rhythm emerged. When she stopped the wagon, he unhitched the horse. When her hands blistered from cooking, he fetched water without question. He never looked for thanks. She never offered instructions. What grew between them wasn't romance, wasn't servitude. It was survival with grace. At night, he sat facing the dark while she curled beneath blankets. He stayed awake longer than he needed to, always listening. She noticed his shoulders twitch when owls called too close, how his body never fully rested, as if sleep was a luxury he hadn't earned. She didn't ask. Instead, she rubbed a salve on the raw skin along his wrists where the cage had bitten deepest. He didn't flinch when she touched him. That was enough. They didn't speak, but in the soft passing of a cup, in the tying of a cloak, in the quiet tending of wounds, something began. Not quite love, not quite trust. Just the soft suggestion of a bond that neither of them had planned, but neither could now ignore. The river clearing opened like a secret, quiet and slow. Water moved in ribbons through stone, and the air tasted like something that hadn't been breathed in a while. Miriam let the reins slack and stepped down from the wagon without a word. He followed, boots careful on moss. Neither of them said anything as they unpacked what little they had. Blankets, bread, one pot. It didn't feel like a stop. It felt like a pause the world had offered just for them. He knelt by a tree trunk with his back to her. At first she thought he was mending gear or whittling firewood. But when she stepped closer, she saw it. A strip of bark pulled clean from the tree, and the careful scratch of letters taking shape beneath his hands. Not his name, hers. She froze. There was something almost sacred in seeing her name emerge from his silence. He didn't look back. He just carved as though he were remembering it, not inventing it. When he finished, he stood, turned, and held the bark out in his open palm. No flourish, no meaning explained. Just the shape of her, in letters. She took it gently. "What about you?" she asked. He paused. His eyes flicked down, then back to hers, and after a long silence, he said one word. It wasn't harsh, it wasn't whispered. It was chosen, a name not given by a parent or shouted by a jailer. One he made for himself, now, here. She nodded, and the quiet between them deepened, but not with tension, with knowing. That night, as the fire cracked low and the moon pressed silver through the leaves, he sat behind her. She didn't turn around, didn't ask, but she felt his hands gather her hair. Slowly, deliberately, he braided it, not tight, but sure. At the end, he tied it off with a thin thread of cloth and something small, a bead made of bark carved with his name. Not a claim, not a chain, just a signpost. When she touched it, something settled inside her. A stillness, a recognition. They weren't running anymore. They were building something, not loudly, not quickly, but real. In the town square, they no longer speak her name aloud. When they do, it's in lowered tones, as if saying it too clearly might summon her back. Some say she died of shame. Others say she ran off with a thief. The mayor keeps her room untouched, but never speaks of it. He shakes his head when asked if he had children. The town remembers only what it wants to, the cage, the scandal, the way the world twisted that week before going back to its routines. But far beyond that ridge where the trail grows wild and maps lose their nerve, a cabin stands. Not grand, not boastful, just strong, quiet, hand-built. The porch creaks under two chairs each dusk, and smoke drifts from a stone chimney even in the warmth of spring. Inside, he carves in the corner, always shapes of her, not portraits, echoes, the tilt of her chin when she challenges, the way her braid coils when she's just out of the bath. Small things, the things only someone watching closely would know. She doesn't wear rings anymore. No gold, no ornament, only the braid, always the braid, with 3 beads threaded near its base. The first, brass shaped like a pendant, dulled from years of worth. The second, bark carved with his name, faded at the edges. The third, a smooth stone with a crack through its middle, polished not by hand, but by river time. Dowry, silence, name. Sometimes she finds him asleep with a carving still in his hand. Other times she wakes to coffee, already brewed and a fire crackling low, her braid freshly retied. He rarely speaks. He doesn't need to. Because now when he touches her hair, it's not a question of staying. It's the answer to who he is and who she chose to be.